Yeah, you need a mic too. So, the cross and the resurrection are at the very heart of Christianity. Everything about Christianity hangs on these events 2,000 years ago. There is no historical doubt that Jesus lived. He's not some made-up legend. There's no doubt among historians he was crucified and died. There's no doubt he was reported to have been raised from the dead. These things are indisputable. The question is, what are we going to do with this? What's our reaction to the Easter story this morning? And if you look at the people involved in the Easter story at the time, you see a whole variety of reactions. We have crowds, we have Herod, we have Pilate, we have the disciples, we have religious leaders, the guards, we have those who were crucified alongside Jesus.
Hi, Brian. Yeah. I'm a bit busy at the moment. What, the fundraiser? Oh, yeah, of course I'll help. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, boots and all, you know me. Oh, yes, it was a great game last night, wasn't it? Of course we're going to win this year. Up the wires. Oh, yeah, okay. See you later.
Pete, could you just put your phone on silent? Could everyone else just put their phone on silent? That would be good.
As he rode along, the crowd spread out their garments on the road ahead of him. When he reached the place where the road started down the Mount of Olives, all of his followers began to shout and sing as they walked along, praising God for all the wonderful miracles they had seen. Blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in highest heaven.
The crowds enthusiastically embraced Jesus entering Jerusalem, but it's interesting because later on we have the crowds shouting that Jesus be crucified. Maybe the crowds are a bit like sort of Warriors supporters. They're keen when the Warriors are doing well, but not so keen when they're losing. Crowds can be fickle. Where were the crowds when Jesus was caught up before Pilate? Crowds can get caught up in the moment. Crowds can be swayed one way or another. It's easy to cheer enthusiastically, and then this fundraising committee?
When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, Passover begins in 2 days, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." At the same time, the leading priests and elders were meeting at the residence of Caiaphas, the high priest, plotting how to capture Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the Passover celebration, they agreed, or the people may riot.
The leading priests and elders hated Jesus. To him, he was a threat to their own agenda. He was outside their world of power and control. He was a disruptor to the status quo. And it's interesting even today that people can get really angry by Jesus. Even the name Jesus seems to sometimes get people angry. Jesus' death and resurrection generate this sort of hostile reaction. They're vehemently opposed to Jesus and Christianity. Maybe for them, Jesus threatens their own views or their autonomy, or maybe Jesus is seen as male and an authority figure, and for those who've been abused by the church or those in authority, this is deeply triggering. Or maybe Jesus is a threat to their own behaviour, but when people react with anger towards Jesus, you know that something is acting as a trigger. Maybe you find yourself getting angry at Jesus and you're not quite sure why. Where is it that is that another cell phone? Whose cell phone's ringing?
Oh, hi. Yeah, Paul here. You're not ringing about that fundraiser, are you? Look, it's not really what I signed up for. No, I said I'd help. It's a great idea, but I haven't really got the time to commit to it. You
And even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the leading priests and elders of the people. The traitor, Judas, had given them a prearranged signal. "You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss." So Judas came straight to Jesus. "Greetings, Rabbi," he exclaimed, and gave him the kiss. Jesus said, "My friend, go ahead and do what you have come for." Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. Then Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I some dangerous revolutionary that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there teaching every day." But this is all happening to fulfill the words of the prophets as recorded in the scriptures. At that point, all the disciples deserted him and fled.
It's interesting because about a year earlier, Jesus had begun to talk to his followers about the fact that he would die and that there would be a cost to following him. And Peter, who's arguably the closest disciple to Jesus, said, "Look, I'm never going to desert you." And yet he too runs away and later publicly disavows ever knowing Jesus. Some people run from the cross because Jesus said, if you want to follow me, you're going to have to take up your cross. And when he said that wasn't some sort of metaphorical sort of saying. In those days, if you took up your cross, you're on your way to death, to die. And this is a reality for the early believers, just as Marion shared before. It's a reality for many in the world today. The early disciples died in their hundreds because they would not back down. And for some, Christianity is great until there's a cost. This is what really frustrates me about a sort of prosperity doctrine that's often preached, because it's not what Jesus taught. He said, look, this could cost you. It could cost you your friends, your reputation. It could cost you time and money. It's not like Christianity is something that you can sort of just add in to your life. Like we go to the gym or we go to the tennis club. We add that in. Jude, you're an elder.
Look, I'm just in the middle of something, actually church at the moment. Sorry, what do you want? It's school fundraiser.
What
I
school
know
is
the
this?
right thing to do is, but I'm getting a lot of pressure to keep quiet. Yep, I know that Easter eggs should be recalled, but committee want to keep them on the down low. Yeah, it would just cause a huge issue if everybody knew that they can make you sick. Yeah, well, yeah, look, actually, look, I've got to go. Count me out.
Easter eggs making people sick. Anyway.
Now Jesus was standing before Pilate, the Roman governor. "Are you the king of the Jews?" the governor asked him. Jesus replied, "You have said it." But when the leading priests and the elders made their accusations against him, Jesus remained silent. "Don't you hear all these charges they are bringing against you?" Pilate demanded. But Jesus made no response to any of the charges, much to the governor's surprise. Now it was the governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration to release one prisoner to the crowd, anyone they wanted. This year there was a notorious prisoner, a man named Barabbas. As the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" He knew very well that the religious leaders had arrested Jesus out of envy. Just then, as Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him this message: "Leave that innocent man alone. I suffered through a terrible nightmare about him last night." Meanwhile, the leading priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be put to death. So the governor asked again, "Which of these two do you want me to release to you?" The crowd shouted back, "Barabbas!" Pilate responded, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" They shouted back, "Crucify him!" "Why?" Pilate demanded. "What crime has he committed?" But the mob roared even louder, "Crucify him!" Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours." And all the people yelled back, "We will take responsibility for his death, we and our children." So Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified.
reaction is interesting because, like, Pilate was not a God follower in any way, but he knew that Jesus didn't deserve to die. He knew that. He could see that this was trumped up charges, but he wanted to avoid conflict. He was a politician at heart, and politicians always think of their own career. And he was thinking strategically about his own career. Sometimes this is what people do with Easter. They avoid it. They avoid it because might cause offence to some people. They avoid thinking about it because it's challenging. They just go into avoidance mode. Pilate avoided the issue of what was true and just because Pilate wanted to protect himself. That is not that fundraiser again, is it? Who is it this time? Graham. I knew it would be someone like Graham. Yeah, just at church.
Yeah, no, honestly, mate, I'm probably going to sleep on there, but people face for it. Yeah, no, mate, you don't, honestly, you don't want their guy to be anything never fundraising committee. Honestly, remember the church camp last year when he was in charge of telling people what to bring and he forgot to tell them to bring plates and cutlery? Yeah, I know. Yeah, and the one before that, when all the other church camps got through, but honestly, mate, this guy is ridiculous. Just don't trust him, don't get him doing it for this issue. Alright? Hey, man, thanks for that. Bye.
The crowd watched and the leaders scoffed. He saved others, they said. Let him save himself if he really is God's Messiah, the chosen one. The soldiers mocked him too by offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out to him, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." A sign was fastened above him with the words, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, "So you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself. And us too, while you're at it."
Herod mocked Jesus. The crowds and the leaders mocked Jesus. One of the thieves hanging beside him on the cross mocked Jesus. Now, what's behind mocking? When someone mocks someone, what is it? It's pride. It's looking down on others. Some people will mock the Easter story. They don't need God. They say Christianity is a crutch. It's for losers. The fact is that the reality is we often all need a crutch in life. Bronwyn, I suspect this is your fundraiser.
Hi, Peggy. Look, you just have to keep quiet about those chocky bars. It would be terrible for the school if that got out. Imagine if the press got hold of that. Look, we're just going to have to cover it up. We've invested $10,000 in that product. Look, I can't talk about this right now. Just do it.
As the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and told the leading priests what had happened. A meeting with the elders was called, and they decided to give the soldiers a large bribe. They told the soldiers, "You must say, Jesus' disciples came during the night while we were sleeping, and they stole his body. If the governor hears about it, we'll stand up for you so you won't get in trouble." So the guards accepted the bribe and said what they were told to say. Their story spread widely among the Jews, and they still tell it today.
So the elders bribed the soldiers to keep quiet. They didn't say to the soldiers, "You've made up this report." No, they didn't deny what the soldiers told them. They just wanted to keep it quiet. But this is a denial of reality. There are people who have been brought up with Christianity and the Christian message who now deny it. There are people who have been to church but now deny the reality of Jesus' death and resurrection. Denial is when we close our ears to the truth. It's not disbelief that this could happen. It's a denial of truth. It's quite a powerful thing to deny truth, to deny it altogether.
Hello? Yeah, no, I can't really talk right now. I'm in the middle of church, actually.
Yeah. One of my staff.
Wait, what? No way. I don't believe it. It can't have happened. Really? Which school?
The women were terrified and bowed with their faces to the ground. Then the men asked, "Why are you looking among the dead for someone who is alive? He isn't here. He has risen from the dead. Remember what he told you back in Galilee? That the Son of Man must be betrayed into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, so that he would rise again on the third day." Then they remembered that he had said this. So they rushed back from the tomb to tell his 11 disciples and everyone else what had happened. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and several other women who told the apostles what had happened. But the story sounded like nonsense to the men, so they didn't believe it. However, Peter jumped up and ran to the tomb to look. Stooping, he peered in and saw the empty linen wrappings. Then he went home again, wondering what had happened.
We see the woman just struggling to convince the others that Jesus was alive. It just seemed too incredible. I mean, for some, the idea that someone could come back from the dead is just ridiculous. And it is a ridiculous notion. It's fairy tale stuff. It only makes sense if Jesus were not an ordinary human at all. But if Jesus is God in human form, then the opposite is true. It makes no sense he could be dead. If Jesus is God in human form, then of course he can come back from the dead. It makes perfect sense. But there are some other reactions to the Easter story as well. We see the centurion who's been in charge of crucifying Jesus. And it says at 12 o'clock, middle of the day, the night sky, the midday sky darkened. And then he heard Jesus cry out. And he probably wasn't aware of it at the time, but the temple curtain split down the middle. And it says that he fell to his knees in worship. He said, "Surely this man is innocent." That's a great response to the Easter story, falling on our knees in worship. In Matthew 18, it says that the disciples went up the mountain and they saw Jesus again. And it says they worshipped, but it says that some doubted. And the commentators say it's not so much that they doubted Jesus was alive, but they weren't sure how to respond. They believed, but they didn't know what to do with Jesus being alive again. And that's okay. It's okay to acknowledge and say, yes, I believed, but be uncertain. That's an okay response as well. Then we see the thief on the cross. That's not the one who was mocking Jesus, but the other one. And he's there, and he says to the other thief, "Look, we deserve to die. Jesus, remember me in your kingdom." Now this man has nothing to give. He is helpless. All right, he cannot earn his way, and say, "Well, I'm good enough for God." He can't do that. All he can do is reach out and say, "God, have mercy." And that also is a great response to the Easter message. Some people will say to me, if they know I'm a minister, they say, "I'm not really a bad person. I'm not a bad person. I think God will let me into heaven." But the fact is, none of us are good enough for God. As the Bible says, we're all sinners. We've all stuffed up. We all need God's grace. As you came in, you got a little card. The kids, you should have got a little card as well. It's got a whole lot of emojis on it. And those emojis are some of the different reactions that I've talked about today. What's your reaction to the Easter story this morning? Who do you identify with? Which emoji do you identify with? Maybe you can identify with the crowds. A bit hot and cold. Sometimes it seems like this Christianity stuff's a good thing. Sometimes not so keen. Maybe you find yourself getting angry. You're not sure why, but you get angry when you hear about Jesus and Christianity. Maybe your reaction is one of disbelief, or one of avoidance, or running away because it just seems the implications are too high, or maybe it's one of mockery. Maybe it's one of denial. Maybe this morning your attitude is one of worship. Just to fall on your knees before a God who would die for you, the God who put the stars into space, being willing to suffer for you. Maybe your response is one of hesitancy. Maybe it's one this morning of just needing to receive, that your hands are out saying, "God, I so know I need your forgiveness and grace." The question is, what do we do with this event? C.S. Lewis once said, we either have to conclude that Jesus is God, a liar, or a lunatic. Because only a lunatic goes around saying that they're God. But Jesus doesn't sound like a lunatic. Is he a liar? Is he the greatest con artist who ever existed? Again, when you read the accounts of his life, it's pretty hard to see him being a liar. He comes across as someone incredibly wise. People are attracted to him. He reads human hearts perfectly. He's deeply compassionate towards people. He has an authority. He astounds people. These aren't the qualities of a liar or a lunatic. But you know, we can't sit on the fence either, because one day when we die or when Christ comes back, we're going to have to give an account of our lives. We're going to have to give an account of what we do with this Easter story. So as we come to communion this morning, I'll just get Roz to take the cloth. It's you, Roz. Take the cloth off. As we come to the Easter story this morning, and we think about our response, as we have communion, it's an opportunity to respond. Because when Jesus was having his last meal with the disciples, which was a Passover meal, and Passover meal celebrated what happened centuries and centuries ago when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. An angel of death passed over the doorposts of Jewish homes that had blood on them. The homes that didn't have blood, the firstborn child died, and because of this, Pharaoh released the Israelites from slavery. Now this is a prophetic picture. When they had Passover, they didn't know it when they were celebrating it, but we can look back and say this is a prophetic picture of what was to come. When Jesus died and his blood was shed, then we are released from the curse of slavery and death. Not slavery literally, but slavery from sin and from our own selfish desires. Jesus frees us so we can be who he created us to be. So when Jesus came to the end of the Passover meal, he took bread, which is just a normal part of the meal, and he said, look, this bread, represents my body that's going to be given for you. The bread reminds us of Jesus' humanity, of Jesus coming in human form. But he took the cup, just the normal cup at the end of the supper, and he said, this cup is a symbol of my blood that's going to be shed for you. This is a new covenant between us and God, a covenant sealed in blood. What is this new covenant? Well, the covenant is simply this, that if we accept that Jesus is God, that he died for us, and we begin to orientate our lives around Jesus Christ, then we'll be forgiven, we'll be restored in our relationship with God, both now and eternity, and we'll become children of God. Not because we've done anything, we can't earn it, we don't deserve it, we simply come with our hands out wide and say, this is a gift. That's the covenant that God has made with us. Now, you might have been a Christian and been coming to this church for 80 odd years, 70 years. You might be here and you don't consider yourself a Christian. But the invitation this morning is that you can come if your response is one of worship, is one of maybe believing but still with questions, or just you're coming with hands out to receive, then come and take this bread and drink. We don't believe there's anything magical about this bread and drink. There is nothing magical about it. It has no supernatural sort of qualities. It's symbolic. But if your attitude is one of worship, if your attitude is one of coming despite your questions, if your attitude is one of an open heart, hands, then God will meet you, I believe, through this bread and through this drink. If your attitude is one of disbelief or mocking or running from or denial, then as the communion elements are passed along, just pass it by. There's no judgment from us. Our prayer would be, though, at some point, that you will experience the reality of Easter for yourself. Children, as the plates are handed round, just please check with your parents before taking communion. They might feel you're not ready yet, and that's okay. But you can still listen to the song that's going to be played in a second. And you can pray your own prayer. Just pray a simple prayer like, thank you, Jesus, for dying for me. I want to follow you and be your child. So the team are going to hand around the elements now. And thank you. And as they're being handed around, consider what your response is to the events of Easter. And listen to this song that's being played.